The direction you are going is more important than the position you are in. Whether you feel like you're at the top of the game or whether you feel like you're in the dumpster, doesn't matter, but the direction you're heading is what's more important. Whether you're at the top or the bottom, if you're going in a positive direction and the direction you want to, then that's what's most important, because you'll either stay on top, you'll get to the place you want to be by focusing on that process and not just where you are right now. One of the main things I took away from my PhD was the ability to recognize what I don't know. When the mitochondria dysfunction, it's not just that we have less energy. It really impacts the health of everything else our cells are doing. If the mitochondria is not working properly, that, really the consequences of mitochondria, poor mitochondria health, are numerous throughout the cell.
Brad, here we are, man. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, man.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to it. Yeah.
Let's dive right in, bro.
Love it. Any chance we can have a good time in the Sunshine State, I'm all for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you only have 24 hours. We got to make the most of this, man. Welcome, dude. Welcome. It's great to have you. So let's start with why, man. Tell me a little bit about why you do what you do.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think as I've been looking at this, why I do what I do is I've always had this constant curiosity to understand how things work, coupled with just the desire to be the best version of myself. So I guess if, kind of as a little background, I grew up in Toronto area, went down to St. Louis, Lindenwood University for my undergrad. And I was just fascinated with sport at the time. I was down there on a golf scholarship. And at that time, I was really obsessed with how do I be the best golfer that I can be? How do I be the best student that I can be? And in kind of that pursuit, got involved with the athletic performance side of things and how do we perform to the maximum of our capabilities. And that's just evolved kind of throughout my path. So that, transitioned eventually into looking at, okay, how do we live the healthiest quality life, and wanted to do a PhD that was a little more focused on general population.
You went from golfer to PhD. You said, I want to be the best at golf, and you ended up...
Yeah, well, you know what? I found out pretty quick that I'd rather be betting on my brains than my body.
There you go. Yeah.
Golf was a good time.
Wise of you, yeah.
But
sure.
I think with everything I've kind of gone through, whether it was then the PhD and doing muscle physiology, kind of, running clinical trials, looking at how the muscle works and how does exercise and nutrition influence its metabolism, to now focusing more on how do we make a meaningful impact on people's lives? How do we translate what we know from the science into actionable things that can help, a couple 100,000 grandmothers play with their grandkids? That's a lot more exciting and fulfilling to me than the original kind of be the best athlete I can be.
Best golfer.
Yeah. And so that's kind of through it all, there's been a curiosity to just understand how things work and marry that with being the best version of myself.
And when did that wisdom take place? When did you go from, hey, I want to be the best golfer to I want to be a researcher? How did that happen?
I'd say, when I was younger going into my undergrad there, it was even like 50-50. I always would consider myself a bit of a book nerd, but also with golf, I loved it, and I wasn't very talented, so I needed to kind of embrace the physical training side to maximize what I had. It was, I figured if I can make myself the best athlete, I'll probably help my golf game.
Yeah.
And it was pretty even going into the start of my university, but it was really my second year where I got involved thanks to a guy named Chad Kirksick. He's actually the president of the International Society of Sports Nutrition now, but he was my mentor and really introduced me to research. It just opened my eyes to seeing like what we could do scientifically with these elite performers. And it wasn't so much that my passion or desire for golf waned. It was just that my interest and curiosity for research kind of surpassed it. And so that was really the transition in like my second year.
There's the mentorship, seeing what's possible, having access to the kind of research.
Yeah, exactly. Just seeing how it worked. I mean, it was a complete new world to me. We were in the gym training with the team. It was, Tuesday morning, 5:30 a.m. And there was this guy in a tie over in the corner, had I think it was some of the St. Louis Blues hockey players at the time, but they were jumping on this plate. And yeah. I was looking over, I said, what's going on there? So I went over, he asked, he had moved to Lindenwood as a professor, setting up his lab. And it kind of told me, it's an exercise physiology lab. We do a lot of performance, body composition testing, primarily with these athletic populations. And I was hooked. I was studying exercise science at the time, and I ended up taking his research course that year.
Wow.
So, it just kind of opened my eyes to seeing, you can take this love for and curiosity in science and your curiosity for sport and performance and do them both in the same place. And that I would say is really how the desire, the shift, as you say, really happened. It was just my desire to really learn more about that.
Yeah, you had an intention. You wanted to fill it with the right process, and that process was science. And I want to ask you, what do you have to say about, your let's say your gratitude for your education? I see a lot of people online that are self-proclaimed experts, and they're very passionate, but what do you have to say about your education and how important it is to have that real scientific credibility in order to speak on behalf of what's happening and helping other people?
Yeah, well, I think, as we talk philosophically, like education is one of the most important things across the board. And, that obviously takes very different shapes and forms. I think in terms of a formal academic training, I'm extremely grateful and have endless gratitude really for my family, because they were the supporters and just encouraging the academic pursuits for me. But really it was just education of any kind, that half my family doesn't even have don't have a degree beyond high school, and they're some of the smartest people I know, right? Education doesn't have to be a formal degree, but with the formal degree does come some areas where you are well trained and you're tried and tested. There's a great kind of figure, and the name of it slips my mind right now, but it's kind of, knowledge on
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger effect, exactly. Where it's like how confident you are and how much you know.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of people, we all go through that phase where we're learning and we're getting confident that we're learning.
You think you know it all.
But I would say really one of the main things I took away from my PhD was the ability to recognize what I don't know. And I think that's the true value, is that you can recognize where your limitations are with, some of that good training. It can come from other places too. But there's a lot of people who have learned a fact or two and feel very confident for sure. Yeah. Definitely, if you go to a pretty rigorous academic training, then you'll hit that point early on. Yeah. Some of the most confident people are the first semester master's students. Yeah. And then you find them 2 years later, the confidence is low, even though their knowledge is sky high. And eventually, you just kind of find, your limitations, you know what you know, but you even more so know what you don't know. Yeah. And when you don't know something, you've developed the strategies to learn and problem solve. Right. So I think I have immense gratitude for the opportunities I had and the support I had from my family to, pursue education. But then I would say just what I took out of it, the scientific or field specific expertise, it's maybe not even the top 3 things I found most valuable about doing my doctorate.
It's more so like the process of seeing science for what it is, acknowledging what you don't know, and having methods to the madness that help you outline, all right, how do we figure this out? How do we put a study together and learn something new?
Exactly. Like, knowing the ins and outs of running a specific stable isotope test. I know you're talking about some of that, I think, with some of your previous guests, but, how to measure metabolism of a certain protein in muscle, or knowing how a certain statistical model works. Yeah, that doesn't really do much in 99.9% of your life. But if you can have the confidence and some skill sets to know if you encounter something that you aren't sure about, you can find your way through that. And, you can systematically and effectively solve problems and gain knowledge. That's really what it is. You learn how to learn. Yeah. And so I think that was, I have immense gratitude for the academic training.
Yeah. Because, some of the critiques that I see online about nutrition science is that the folks that are studying it are looking at outdated research. And, I went to school and I know that it's not just about learning what's there. It's understanding how it works and how you can further the field, especially if you did your PhD, right? So what do you have to say about that? The outdated literature and in a classroom setting?
Yeah, I would say I think that with the more you study, spend a lot more time reading than you do saying. And, reading is one of the most valuable things. You learn to read, and then you can read to learn. I think there's a lot of people in that phase where they're very confident without maybe having the knowledge to back it up, that aren't as well read as some others who are maybe a bit quieter. And in the exercise physiology and nutrition, like, firsthand from studying it, some of the best work was done in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Like, there is really incredible research done. You can go through, we would joke that if you have what you think is a unique study idea, go back 40, 50 years, and someone, whether it, be John Hawley or, Ben Saltine, like, someone's probably already done it. And that's very true. But I'd say the kind of added level to that isn't just thinking that newer is necessarily better, but it's actually recognizing the value and knowing that, okay, this one study from 1974 is extremely valuable because it showed us that weightlifting can actually improve mitochondrial volume.
Right.
And that's one of the few studies we have that shows that. So that's a valuable...
And it's foundational knowledge in exercise physiology.
Foundational knowledge, exactly. But if you look at that and were to see something published in 2017 on that, it's like, okay, well, how novel is that really? Like, are we building on the field? The time something's published doesn't, necessarily relate to its value. So what I'd say to your original questions, I'll circle back, is newer always better? No. I think the real value is being able to see where the good research is, whether that's from 1965 or 2025. So the outdated knowledge isn't necessarily a bad thing for learning basics or foundational research, but repeating it, or people dressing it up, the same thing, dressing it up as something new in today's day and age, shouldn't be viewed as groundbreaking.
Right. And if we can fast forward, how did your initial intent to, dive into the field of performance science and nutrition, how did that become, your responsibility now of furthering what we know in these clinical trials?
Yeah. How did it kind of come to that? Well, I think that, from the performance side, it's really cool working with athletes. I'm honored to have had the chance to both research, coach, and, just train with a lot of them for 3-4 years there. What shifted for me was, I guess, the added meaning I felt to what I said before, having the ability to make a meaningful impact in everyday people's lives. I was very lucky that I grew up with 4 healthy and very present grandparents in my life. They're instrumental in really who I am today. And their good health allowed them to do that. And the thought of being able to help, a grandmother, a grandfather, or just any person through their entire life have that positive role in, the next generation's upbringing was a lot more exciting to me than trying to help, an elite runner shave a tenth of a second off their 100-meter time. So the shift to more of a healthy aging what happened, and that was as I was finishing up in St. Louis and wanting to go do my PhD. I knew I wanted to keep researching, and wanted to add I was also studying chemistry during my undergrad. I wanted to add some of the the kind of the biochemistry that I was learning into this research setting. And so Stu Phillips, who I did my PhD with, is one of the best in the world for exactly that, using stable isotopes to measure metabolism in all sorts of scenarios, whether it be, aging or young individuals who are exercising, maybe they're bedridden, immobilized.
Sorry, for those who might not be familiar with this language, what does measuring stable isotopes in metabolism mean within the setting?
Yeah, of course. So it's just a word. Basically, one of the key methods that we use in that lab, and there's a handful around the world that do it, is when you can use stable isotopes to measure metabolism. So if we think of atoms, like we've heard of things like carbon or hydrogen, right? There's a molecular weight or an atomic weight to these atoms that occurs in nature. When we have an isotope, it just means it's the same chemical, but with a slightly different weight. And so it happens by when you have an extra neutron in the atom. But this stable isotope is something where it acts the same way as the original chemical, but it's slightly heavier. And so what we can do is actually give people, say, like water or a solution with a stable isotope of, say, the amino acid leucine. And that'll get incorporated into all the leucine that's in their body. And what we do is we can take things like muscle biopsy. So if we add this tracer, which is basically just a flag, that acts the same as leucine, but it's one we can identify. We take a muscle biopsy, we say wait a couple hours, or we put them through exercise.
Measure mTOR.
Exactly. And we, take another muscle biopsy. We can see how much
muscle protein synthesis.
Yeah, we can see how much of that tracer has been added into the muscle. So you can measure things like muscle protein synthesis. And certainly there's a whole wide range of measures. I was very fortunate to learn from one of the best, kind of how that works. But basically we were able to take that biochemistry and use those methods in these clinical trials where we're studying things like exercise or nutrition in both young and old individuals.
Nice. And then how did that transform into Timeline, Urolithin A?
Yeah, so that came about as I was doing my PhD there with Stu. The interest in running clinical trials. It was awesome to actually be able to test boots on the ground, like how are these interventions impacting our muscle health? And one of the studies I got involved with was actually involved MitoPure, Timeline's main product.
And you weren't working with MitoPure at the time?
No, it was a project that Stu had had come up with. We had the opportunity to run, and so I got to know the team at Timeline a little bit while we were doing that project. And really from there, as I was going through finishing up my PhD the last couple of years, I was realizing, okay, I don't think professorship or academia is really the route I want it to go. Honestly, I just don't feel like I have the desire to lead and build out my own research program at an institution. And to me, it was much more appealing to go beyond the science and see not just how can we use science, but how can we translate this into meaningful, action items or things that people can apply to their own life.
Satisfying your original intention that started all of this.
Yeah, it's like the science is one thing. You can have the best product, the best data, but that's only part of actually making an impact on someone's life. The arc of discovery is huge. From the time someone discovers a molecule in the lab to finds a way to turn it into a nutrient or a drug that someone can have, to go through all the clinical trials, and then to actually have a product that people can use and benefit from. It's a huge arc, and I've done a lot of the science part there, but there's so much more that goes into actually getting this helpful molecule or whatever it is in the hands of people where it can have a benefit.
Right.
So for me, when the opportunity to join Timeline came about, it was a no-brainer because all the science is world class. They've been doing that for over 15 years.
No way.
And so Timeline was founded in 2006. Yeah, 7. I should probably know the exact year, but 2006ish.
15 years to 10.
So it was what we're 2025 now. No, so over 15 years. It was 2005, 6, 7.
20 years. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that they had been around that long.
Yeah, it's quite uncharacteristic, I would say. Really putting in the hard miles of doing the rigorous science to really be led by the science. It's quite unusual, particularly in the nutrition or cosmetic
space. Efficacious and just great to know. I mean, that's great.
That's the philosophy. We're a group of scientists who are going to continue to be led by the science, and science takes time. So the opportunity came about to join the team there, and it was a no-brainer for me because not only do you get to keep doing the science, but you also get to be involved in trying to help bring such a helpful product to people where it can make a meaningful difference.
And how long have you been with them?
Just under a year. So I just joined in January.
Sweet.
I moved over to Lausanne, Switzerland. So all the R&D and some other team members are based there. That's where
you're living in Switzerland.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So
how's your Swiss?
Well, I'm in a French part. Je peux parler un peu français.
Well, you're Canadian.
Yeah, but I in Toronto. We grew up speaking English, and
they don't. Is Swiss even a language?
No, actually, it's not. So funny enough, they have 4 languages, and
it's French, German, Dutch.
No, but French, German, yeah. So I think it's like 70% ish of the country German speaking. Where I am near Geneva is French speaking, maybe about 20% the country. 10% ish is Italian.
Yeah.
There's one or two cantons, which are kind of like
Italian.
Yeah. So it's Italian border, just on the kind of southeast east there. Yeah.
Wow.
And then the original, I don't know if it's original. I'm still learning my Swiss history as I live there, but there's one area that speaks a language called Romanche.
Nice.
And that I think is historically a language native to the area. But yeah, four national languages. I speak none of them, so it's been a fun ride getting acclimated there.
That's unbelievable, man. And what would you say over the course of the 20 years that Timeline has been around, what would you say are some of the biggest scientific breakthroughs that the company has had?
Yeah, I think if you're to look at the highlights, there's a couple, and maybe actually just the first thing to highlight is the time, and knowing that the folks that were starting this, so our president, co-founder, Chris Rinch, along with Patrick Obisher, and when the co-founders were starting this, they were in it for doing it right.
What did they want to accomplish from the get-go? What was the idea?
So the mission really was, there are a lot of natural products that have health benefits, right? What is it about those things, those foods, that cause them to be beneficial? So at the time, if we think back the 20-ish years, pomegranates were really having a heyday. Yeah, they were rightfully so. But whether it be associations with areas that eat a lot of pomegranates and seeing lower incidence of cardiovascular disease or whatever it was, the antioxidant profile,
antioxidants, nitrates,
biotic
fiber,
exactly. Pomegranates were having a hot moment, and so what the founders did there was they actually wanted to look in the pomegranate and say, okay, what is it in the pomegranate that's having these beneficial effects? And that led to what I would say is the first major discovery, which is Urolithin A. And that we'll get into what that is, I know, but Urolithin A, or what's branded as now as MitoPure, it's a postbiotic, which means that when we eat foods such as a pomegranate, our gut microbiome will transform the components of that food into a new molecule. So it's not a prebiotic or a probiotic where it's either adding to the bacteria that's in our gut or feeding the bacteria in our gut. It's actually our gut microbiome transforming the nutrients that are in a pomegranate into a completely new molecule.
So it transforms Urolithin A into something else.
So it transforms the polyphenols that are
polyphenols into Urolithin A.
Into Urolithin A. So they transform it into Urolithin A, and then that's released into circulation.
Wow.
And originally it was thought to be a waste product. They're looking at, you break down the pomegranate into all its pieces.
Yeah.
You can imagine everything that's in there. There's no shortage.
Yeah.
And then when they're looking, at this point, it's in preclinical models, looking at all the things it's getting metabolized into, where it's going. And Urolithin A was just kind of thought to be a waste product. But as they're going through and ruling things off, saying, no, this isn't having these effects or whatnot, the lead researcher who they're working with at the time, this is based out of the Swiss Institute of Technology. It's kind of like Switzerland's MIT, or the EPFL is the acronym for it in French. But the professor who was doing some of this work, the story, he came running across campus because he had just found these incredible results, and he was banging down on Chris's door saying, what is this? What is this molecule you gave me? It's extending the lifespan of...
Chris thought it was just a waste product.
Everyone did. Everyone. You metabolize it, here's a waste product. Like you get ammonia when you break down amino acids, whatever it is.
Right.
And so they thought it was this waste product, but a professor is saying, this extended lifespan in these C. elegans, these worms that you use to measure lifespan, it's extending lifespan like 48%. It's making the animals much stronger, more vitality. What's going on? Like, what is this? And it's this waste product. So they thought, no, it's actually a postbiotic, Urolithin A. So that I would say would be like the major discovery. And we can go into as much detail as you want, but I would say the highlights are, one, the discovery of it. Second would be showing the benefits of what it can do in these preclinical models. So that was published in Nature in 2016. The major findings there.
Published in Nature.
Top paper. And, like I said, it's scientists who are in it to do the science right. next from that would probably be the, again, published in Nature Medicine and Nature Metabolism were the first two major publications. First showing just what it's doing in these preclinical models, that it is actually improving things like muscle strength and the cellular performance by
at this point
improving
out of worms.
Yeah, so these are like worms, rodents, but the second publication really was in humans, showing it's safe, it's bioavailable, it's improving the signature of mitochondrial health.
Nice.
So all the proteins associated with mitochondria, it's increasing them in a dose-dependent manner, and then it was getting into the randomized controlled trial.
So how many pomegranates are you eating per day, man?
Yeah, none. I got my MitoPure. And actually, funny enough, that was a study, and we can go into it as much as you want, but really it was showing, okay, we found it in animals. It's having these benefits by improving mitochondria. Specifically, what Urolithin A does is stimulate mitophagy. So that's the
cleaning up the mitochondria.
Exactly, the selective breakdown of dysfunctional mitochondria.
Huge.
Show it's safe and effective in humans at doing that same thing. And then you get into the randomized control trials where you start seeing that, it improves strength 12%. It improves the mitochondria health of these overweight, middle-aged, older adults. And now most recently, benefits that it has for skin and immune, other very mitochondria-dominant cell types. So I would say those are kind of the main arcs along the way. But there was actually a study comparing it to pomegranates.
Yeah.
Which is just exactly that, because at the end of the day, it's about making people's lives better.
Yep.
Get the benefits, and I'm food first all the way.
Yep.
If you can get something from food, you should get it from
Love
food.
it. Yeah.
And so this was a study led by our chief medical officer, Dr. Anurag Singh, who really was, pioneering a lot of this, the whole clinical development of MitoPure. And what they did is they said, okay, well, let's feed people pomegranate juice, because that is an extremely concentrated form of those polyphenols. So we'll feed them that. We'll measure their blood for the following 72 hours, see how much urolithin A there is. And then we'll have them, go away for a couple weeks, wash out, come back, take a dose of MitoPure. And you do this in a randomized fashion, so it's not biased. And what ultimately found is that to get the same exposure to urolithin A that you would from one dose of MitoPure, you need to drink 1.5 liters of pomegranate.
It's a lot of sugar.
That's a lot of sugar. At that point, you're cutting your foot off.
And it's expensive. It's not cheap. Oh, yeah.
It's not cheap. They're the pomegranate companies are riding that wave. Yeah. So that was really actually the second clinical trial that was done in humans, just showing that, okay, this is one of the rare cases where supplementation is necessary to have these benefits. You think of something like creatine.
And how did you guys find the dose?
Yeah, so in that first study, the safety study, you could call it a phase 1, but it's a nutrition product, so it's not really right to call it that. That's more of a drug and pharmaceutical term, but really that first safety study, you do something called a single and multiple ascending dose. So really you have from all the animal data what you think is the equivalent dose in a human. You divide it by 10 or 100, a massive amount, to reduce it to a very minimum level. And you essentially start just going up.
You titrate it.
You titrate it. And so this was starting at 250 milligrams all the way up to 2 grams. And really what was found in that first study was that 500 milligrams to 1 gram is where you see the best benefit. So you see that turnover, that improvement of the mitochondrial profile in these muscle biopsies, all the gene expression. But after 1 gram, it kind of plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really have any added benefit beyond there. So in that first study, you're not just looking at the safety, but you're also refining what that dose is. Right. And it's a pretty standard procedure in a pharmaceutical lens. Obviously, MitoPure, it's nutrition. It's a food supplement.
No, but you want to have sophisticated research. I mean, that's the way to do it right.
Exactly. That's been exactly the approach, is take the rigorous biotech approach to nutrition, which a place we and that firsthand, it's a bit of the wild west. So if you can have
dude, yeah, oh yeah, that's bad. And let me ask you this, man: is this something that you can take and feel can you feel the difference when you take something like MitoPure?
Yeah, it's a great
feel the mitophagy. Can you feel the mitochondria responding to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's one, just full transparency, we don't have clinical data on the perceptions that people have. What I would say is that in terms of the clinical benefits, we see things like the improved muscle strength and endurance after 8 weeks and extending out to 16 weeks, so 2 and 4 months. At a cellular level, we see that improvement in the mitochondrial health after 1 month. And in the perceptions that people have, again, this will be anecdotal because we haven't studied it, but it is things where a lot of times what people report is that, they feel more energetic, they recover quicker from their workouts. If they sleep is actually one that we're measuring in a study right now that we might get into, but a lot of people talk about their sleep quality improving. Duration stays the same, but the refreshing that they have when they wake up is much better after the product. So those are things that people have reported back. In the clinical sense, we see the actual cellular biology improve after 1 month. We see the physiological benefits after 8 weeks. And the more to come on that in terms of what people are actually feeling, because that's something we don't have clinical data on yet, but we're working on right now.
Really technical, specific question that I don't expect necessarily an answer to, but you're back on next phys, so it'd be interesting to entertain. Is there a specific time where maybe there's, I don't know, an accelerated rate of mitophagy happening where you can take Urolithin A and take advantage of what's going on in that moment? Or, is it irrelevant? Is the half-life a certain way where it doesn't even matter when you take it or how, or,
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll start with the end, which does it matter? No. With the pharmacokinetic profile or the kinetic profile of Urolithin A, once a day is sufficient for its benefits. It peaks in the blood after about 6 or 8 hours. It remains slightly elevated up at 24 hours. So a daily dose is what's recommended. In terms of what time, whether it's the morning or the evening, we haven't compared them. We have studies that have used both, and there hasn't been a difference. Same thing, whether it's fasted or fed. So really the most important thing for the benefits are just to take it daily and consistently. Like so much, consistency is the name of the game. But I guess to your point of if you want to talk about, okay, where might we be able to look at this and having an enhanced benefit, you can kind of take a step back and say, all right, what is mitophagy? Well, that's just the mitochondria specific autophagy.
Right.
So that's that cellular breakdown, that recycling system that's in our cells. And
isn't DNA amazing, man?
It's that, man,
shout out to DNA, man. That's
biology,
unbelievable.
Biology, man, it's one where the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And your fascination just goes through the roof. It is, it never ceases to get more interesting.
So, didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, it's
just the moment to appreciate science.
There's so much where the appreciation for the beauty of just the world, the more you learn about it, it kind of hits you in the face. It's tough to believe it's all happening. But yeah, I guess if you're asking like when would mitophagy be highest naturally without it, without something like MitoPure, 2 cases. One, when we're fasted, and second is when we're exercising. So fasting, that's something that a lot of people maybe don't practice regularly. But I think we forget that most of us fast for about 10, 12 hours a day. Overnight, that's when we're not giving our body food. So it will start breaking down more net proteins in our body, including the mitochondria, overnight until we have break fast breakfast, right? And so that's a time where, okay, maybe if we have our MitoPure right before bed, does it have an added benefit?
Right.
We haven't seen it in studies, but I think that would be the hypothetical example of where would we maybe enhance natural mitophagy. Doesn't seem to have an impact, with the effect MitoPure has. And the other is exercise. Exercise not only increases muscle protein synthesis and the formation of new cellular structures, but also increases breakdown. Really what exercise does is it starts everything turning over. Yeah, we're making more and we're breaking more down. Over time, yes, that kind of molds our muscle or whatever tissue into its it's new structure, it's new phenotype, whether it be bigger muscles or, better blood supply to our muscles. But so exercise would be one that maybe MitoPure does have an effect. And we're just starting to see, this results of studies, certainly from Timeline, but also independent investigators now. So actually I just had 2 studies in that sports and performance area published over the last couple months. It seems to have some promising signals in the athletic sense.
It's incredible. I mean, something that comes to mind for me is there's an incredible study published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Cabo et al. 2019 on the evolutionary, call it history of that's redundant. The evolution of fasting. Like why do we have these evolutionarily preserved mechanisms that are triggered by fasting, and what are the cascading effects that has? And it's a fascinating study. It actually towards the end of the study, there's a protocol that people can incorporate to get some of these benefits. The switch between the glucose and ketone switch and how that's responsible for everything from increases in Krebs to, mitophagy and autophagy and such. But I want to mention, and I'd love to get your take on this. As it pertains to fasting, I think there was a big call, like a trend with fasting and like a fasting mimicking diet. And I think a lot of people maybe overdid that. I actually overdid it in my case. I was like, I went off the deep end with fasting and like these low carb diets. And as a young, healthy male lifting often, it wrecked my hormone profile, So I just I would love to get your take on fasting and how folks can incorporate it responsibly, both men and women. And there's a lot of limited research on women and their approach to fasting, and they are more sensitive according to, the time of the month and the female biorhythm. But I would love to get your take on fasting and perhaps how you can make the most of it responsibly.
I think with fasting, like anything, if you're going to adopt a new routine, you need to first ask, what's the purpose? Why are we doing it? So certainly if weight loss is that reason for you, then that you see if it works and you can adhere. A second thing, though, that I would really ask people to consider if they're looking at taking fasting is their age and the time of life that they're at. We're young, healthy people. A lot of people in our situation, if we were to say, I'm going to do a 2-day fast or a 3-day water fast, is that going to ruin us? Probably not. Maybe if we go off the deep end, like you're saying, I'd be curious
chronically fasting like every day, 16 hours and it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm curious about your experience doing that though.
Yeah.
Like if we were to do that one off for like once a year, might not have a huge impact. Where I would just caution people is that say you're a 65-year-old or 75-year-old, that long without food could be very detrimental.
Yeah,
right?
You end up being so catabolic that you end up losing your muscle mass, which at that age is, in my opinion, just extremely important.
It's a huge, watershed moment of losing muscle. And so I wouldn't recommend fasting to most older adults for that reason. Of course, everyone's individual, but I think those are the 2 things I would encourage people to consider if they're looking at a fast. Is just 1, what's the ultimate purpose? And 2, know yourself in the place you're at, because fasting might not be the best option for you to accomplish your goal without really sacrificing too much elsewhere.
Right. And actually, as this paper points out, and I'm going to bridge the gap between this and Urolithin A in just a second.
Yeah.
But as this paper points out, we should technically be experiencing a small degree of ketosis between meals. And most people, they wake up, they eat, and then they snack throughout the day. So it's not just like the 14 to 18 hour window traditionally, but it's also making sure that we're eating, whole nutrient dense food. We do our best to have that element of glucose stability, maybe walking after our meals or eating protein, fiber first, etc. But definitely experience some degree of ketosis between meals. So for me, like nowadays, I fast maybe 14, rarely 16 hours, and 14 is like natural. It's a little more intuitive.
Yeah.
But I make sure that I don't eat between meals.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a much better job of monitoring my hormones in the process and getting enough carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Carbs are so important.
Very, especially like you're saying, as an active guy performing, that
enough carbs.
That is one where like a ketogenic or a fasting diet can certainly be beneficial for some people, but you talk about circumstances where maybe it's not most, that those wouldn't be most conducive to your ultimate goal. Athletic performance is a great one. And that work, there's been great work done by a guy named Marty Gabala as well as some others, but looking at a ketogenic diet or dietary ketosis, what that does to performance. And, it doesn't help.
If you're an endurance athlete, perhaps, right? But if you're like resistance training, then you have to pull the glucose from somewhere.
Exactly.
You don't have glucose from your food, gluconeogenesis, you convert your muscle into glucose, and now you're losing your muscle mass.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the resistance training, and it's interesting, Marty's actually done some work in the endurance area as well, and looking at like time trial performance in cyclists, where there were a few different ways you could do it. I mean, to study someone who's in dietary ketosis, very tough for most people to get there, like you're saying, to cut carbs completely for several weeks to actually start seeing the ketone bodies elevate in blood. What you can do is actually you can have a ketone supplements that will induce
ketonate, K4, hydroxybutyrate. Yeah,
exactly. That it'll induce, and it tastes terrible.
It's the worst tasting supplement I've ever taken in my life.
It tastes terrible. It does its job in terms of elevating the ketone bodies.
That's the thing, is you taste it and you're like, this is going to influence my physiology. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
This is going to work, and this is going to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's going to be, but you know that something with that strong of a taste has to, good or bad, has to do it. But yeah, they've looked at that. And so time trial performance actually worsens in these endurance, like really highly trained cyclists. They see the respiration rate change, which would make sense. Your body's using a different fuel source.
You see a downward shift in RQ, which isn't always beneficial for some athletes.
Yeah.
You know what it is beneficial for? Do you want to nerd out for a second?
Yeah.
I discovered this by accident. I took some ketonate K4 before bed, and because it shifts RQ and stabilizes the glucose, my HRV skyrocketed because I'm breathing less times per minute, so there's more parasympathetic influence. My HRV, every time if I can only get like 6 hours or less of sleep, I take my ketonate K4.
Interesting.
Yeah. I get much better recovery. I feel much better overall.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It is the, that's one, and I mean, obviously wearables have been great for that. And, just being able to monitor things like that on the daily, but it is so cool where you can see, like we talk about these studies and, it's the averages of groups and whatnot. And that's what you need to ultimately build a body of evidence. But just as an individual, it's so cool using those wearables to actually see how your daily life impacts things like your sleep, your HRV. It's really cool. That's wicked.
You know what? It's fun.
Maybe I'll have to call up one of my buddies who does ketone research and maybe have him send over a thing, and I'll look at the HRV with and without the ketone for sure. I'll have to try that out.
I can introduce you to Dominic Diniglantonio, who is one of the world leading experts in ketones. He was actually just featured on the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Okay, right on.
He lives in Florida. I think he's a professor at the University of South Florida,
USF?
USF.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that's, I'm trying to, is USF Tampa area?
Is he what, sorry?
Is it around Tampa? Like Tampa?
I think so, yeah, pretty sure, yeah.
Oh, right on. Well, I'm flying there tonight, so we'll, maybe I'll look. Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, he's a brilliant guy.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, that'd be cool. You've given me an idea. I'm going to try that.
I can introduce you guys. That'd be fun.
That'd be cool.
I wanted to ask you, considering that Urolithin A has this targeted approach with the mitochondria, right? When you do something like fasting, let's say you're fasting, right? Can this help you gain further benefits of fasting? Can it help preserve muscle mass, as we were describing? Maybe on a calorie deficit independent of fasting, can Urolithin A help you preserve muscle while you're cutting and essentially losing fat?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think with some of those scenarios you outline, whether it be fasting or whatever it is, that's inducing like global autophagy, right? So everything's going to start, breaking down. Your body, you're essentially starving your body, in a very short period of time, but your body's saying, okay, I need glucose, I need fat, I need these lipids just to keep functioning. And so it'll start breaking down parts of your body to provide that, really, to the key organs, brain, our central kind of visceral organs. Muscle, exactly how you outlined, you'd break down muscle, gluconeogenesis, you convert that to glucose, your brain has that as a fuel source. That's global autophagy, global cellular breakdown. What's unique about MitoPure is that it specifically targets the mitochondria, and you see the dysfunctional mitochondria is selectively broken down, right? So it's not just breaking down anything that's in the yard. It's taking the broken toy and saying, okay, we're going to break that down into parts. So I'd say that's a key difference in terms of what it does for preserving muscle. That's something there's no published research on in the case of, say, a fast or any atrophy type inducing event. There's nothing published on that.
I had to take a guess. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I'd be really curious to actually more so look at the bioenergetics of the cell, because you can have muscle mass, but that's not necessarily the same as muscle quality. So I would be curious to look at how the quality of the muscle is preserved.
What do you mean by quality?
Yeah, so by quality, I would mean by things like the strength, the metabolic sensitivity of it. So maybe you lose muscle mass because if we're cutting out something like physical activity, or that would be a huge driver of maintaining muscle mass. But what happens to the insulin sensitivity of the muscle? What happens to the actual muscle strength? Because if those can be preserved, even if we're losing mass, that would be promising. So I think my best guess would be, because it's targeting the mitochondria, and the mitochondria are powering all of our cells except red blood cells, that all parts of our physiology, whether it be in the case of something like muscle strength, the actual muscle, the nerve innervating the muscle, the health of this connective tissue around that muscle, those are all going to be improved if they can have enhanced mitochondrial health.
So what's happening is, as mitophagy happens, you mentioned this briefly, I just want to expand on this point. When mitophagy happens, you take the dysfunctional mitochondria. I also want to define what that means in a second.
Yeah.
But you take the dysfunctional mitochondria and you break them apart.
Yeah.
Are those parts waste products, or can they be repurposed for something else?
Yeah, great question. They could totally be recycled. So, mitochondrial proteins, like anything, are just a collection of amino acids. So when we break it down, those proteins...
You just urinate them? Is it...
Well, you can. So you'll excrete some as urea, but a lot of times those proteins won't even leave whatever tissue or cell they're in. So whether it be muscle, mitochondria, when those proteins are broken down, a lot of times they're just reincorporated back into protein. So you can take...
It's recycled.
It's recycling. That's exactly what it is. So you're breaking down the broken version of it into its original parts and rebuilding a newer, healthier one.
Wow. And how would you describe a mitochondria that isn't working properly? Like, what's happening and why is it happening?
Yeah, what is mitochondrial dysfunction? I think this is one where it can be helpful for a lot of people to think of it like the powerhouse, but like an energy factory.
If you don't say the mitochondria is the powerhouse to the cell at least once on every other fitness podcast.
That's right.
Not running a real fitness podcast.
So we'll get them out. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of itself. Does a lot more.
Nice.
It is. It's an energy factory, right?
Yeah.
So certainly dysfunctional mitochondria aren't going to be as good at producing energy, but because of that, how they do that, they have a lot of other impacts when they stop working. So the mitochondria really is where we take all the food we eat, it goes through the mitochondria to get converted into the cellular energy, right? That all our body can actually use. It is like an electrical factory in there. So not only would maybe the energy output decrease, but when things start going wrong, which could simply be, proteins as they age, they become less effective, they break down. We get things like reactive oxygen species being released from the mitochondria, and that'll have other impacts in the cell. So actually, there's a great researcher out of Yale named Gerald Schulman who has really nice work showing how these reactive oxygen species from the mitochondria can impact insulin sensitivity. Essentially, they hit on the IRS1 signaling axis, and this induces insulin resistance. So the whole pathology of, in this case, say, type 2 diabetes, but also things like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, how mitochondria dysfunction is kind of, there's a really good case to be made for why it's at the heart of the pathogenesis of these conditions that are, the everyday killers. So that's a great example of when the mitochondria dysfunction, it's not just that we have less energy. it really impacts the health of everything else our cells are doing.
Wow.
Mitochondria are also really involved in calcium homeostasis. So calcium's a key signaling molecule.
Contraction, among other things.
Absolutely. And so, when that gets out of whack, if the mitochondria is not working properly, that, really the consequences of mitochondria, poor mitochondria health, are numerous throughout the cell.
And what would you say are some of the lifestyle habits, or perhaps call it like diseases or tragic injuries that someone might have that can lead to mitochondrial dysfunction?
That can lead to mitochondrial dysfunction.
Who should be the most concerned about whether they have, maybe they have elevated mitochondrial dysfunction?
Yeah.
Obviously, aging is an obvious one.
Aging's an obvious one, which is everyone. I would say actually probably one of my top candidates would be inactivity. The inactivity, as we were saying, exercise is really this.
We're not biased. It's not like two exercise physiologists speaking on a podcast, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Take home message: do exercise. Good night, folks.
Yeah.
That's all we have to say. It's inactivity really is the what I would say underpins so much of our health as we age, just individuals throughout society. It is the best lifestyle intervention we can do for our well-being, and it's also probably the most deleterious when we don't do it. So, the average individual in this country, part of my research before joining Timeline was a lot around like exercise guideline development. Currently we have less than half of people doing the aerobic exercise that is even recommended, right? Like 47% was the most recent I checked. Okay, but more than half.
And what is the guideline? What should people be doing?
So the guideline for that, generally healthy adult, over 18 years of age, is 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a week. Okay. So you can think of that as, you go for a 50-minute run 3 times a week, or maybe you 30 minutes, you get on the, on a spin ergometer, 5 times a week. But moderate to vigorous, that could be just an elevated kind of jog around the neighborhood. Right. You do that each day when you get home from work or something. That's the guideline. So less than half people are meeting that. But I would say what's even more consequential is that less than 24% of people are meeting the weightlifting guidelines. And again, remember, this is all self-report. So right. I think you're pretty safe to say, all right, take that 48 and 23.2%, chop those in half, because people are going to say they do more than they do. Either way, when you look at people who are actually doing some weightlifting and some aerobic training, we're looking at not even 1 in 5 people. And I think that really is detrimental for health in the sense that exercise stimulates that turnover we're talking about, right? It gets our cells making new healthy structures, but also breaking down a bit unhealthy structures. And what does mitochondrial dysfunction accumulate most from? Inactivity would have to be near the top of the list in terms of our lifestyle. And actually, there's a great paper published a few years ago looking at the hazard ratio, or the risk, kind of relative risk that you get for different diseases based on any exercise you're participating in. And so this was one where just doing either aerobic or weightlifting exercises, you see anywhere from a 10 to 30% reduction in your risk for things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all-cause mortality. And when you combine the two, just participating, not even meeting the guidelines, that's increased to like 30, 40% for some of these, these disease risks, which really speaks to how powerful just doing any exercise is, that you're having something that's reducing your risk of cardiovascular disease by 35%.
Wow.
That's, if that was in a pill, it'd be the best selling thing in the world.
For sure.
So I think inactivity is a huge one when it comes to mitochondrial dysfunction because of our lifestyle.
Sweet. And how do you, if you take someone that's very active, like a lot of the listeners tuning in right now are folks that are on the elite level of fitness.
Okay.
Those folks are getting a lot of turnover in the mitochondria every day. Do you think that those folks, would still benefit from something like MitoPure or Urolithin A?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this, it's when you get people who are really on the edge of human physiology, that's where you really see how incredible our bodies are. It's pretty neat when you get to work, and kudos to anyone who's done the work to get them into that position. Yes, actually, I do think it would be helpful. And we actually just finished a study. This was with Professor Louise Burke down in Australia. It was a study led by a guy named Jamie Whitfield, Dr. Jamie Whitfield there. And what they did is they took MitoPure in this really elite population of distance runners, middle distance runners. Louise's Mount Rushmore of kind of sports scientists, like, anything around nutrition, physiology. She is all-time great in this.
Mount Rushmore of exercises. I'm gonna using that. That's a good.
Louise has to be up there. Her and her husband John are both.
Never heard that line. That's good. Yeah.
So really cool to just have the opportunity to have something that you're making tested by one of the best. And really what they did is they had this population of elite middle distance runners. And when I say elite, I don't mean like they did a marathon. I mean, these are people who are training for and going to the Olympics.
And what's mid distance?
Mid distance. So in this case, we're looking at, say, anywhere from like 4 or 5 miles ish. The actual events that these people do would all be in that range.
That's, by the way, I just want to mention, like, I am not a runner. I'm a sprinter. But I have a lot of respect for the guys that are like getting the world record, like the guys that have 4 or 5 minute miles, like that to me is like, you're really pushing it, because you're basically sprinting for a mile or a couple of miles. And that to me is like, that's performance, man. Like that.
Right when you're on that edge of it's just long enough or just short enough where you feel like you should be sprinting the whole thing, but it's just long enough that it sucks to do that.
Oh, yeah.
There was a really cool bit, actually, I saw just on the sports and where they're most challenging. So it's things like, the 400 meter for running, or the 200 in swimming, where you get in that range of like 45 seconds to like 2-3 minutes.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly where you're in that shift, right?
Yeah.
You can't keep up your sprint the whole time, but you're not really easing off enough to that you would if you were doing, say, 5 or 6 minutes even. So
it's like 90% of like an all-out sprint.
It sucks. Well, it's awesome, but it feels terrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe arguably worse than the ketones. Just
for sure. For sure. Close.
But yeah, so I guess on this study, it was really cool what they did. It was during one of their altitude training camps leading into one of the last Olympic cycles. So 4 weeks, these elite runners randomized to MitoPure placebo, took it for the 4 weeks. And what they saw is that after the supplementation period in these elite runners, markers of muscle damage were lower after the time trial. So a key enzyme, creatine kinase, there was a significantly less amount of it in the blood after their time trial following supplementation. And what was really neat is that these athletes' perceived exertion was actually significantly lower in the MitoPure group.
How much lower?
So in this case, you're just using a Borg scale. So you're looking at, it was about 1.5, 2 points, which, is a difference between saying I'm all out or I'm working very hard to this is slightly hard. And when you think that the performance, their time trial performance didn't change, but if you've got less muscle damage and you're feeling less exerted, that speaks volumes to what it could be doing for your recovery, for your ability to train, at a higher intensity. So that was just published in Sports Medicine, I guess now about a month ago.
Wow.
And really is opened our...
That you emailed me about. You said new study. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So this is one of them. Yeah. So we've actually had 3 come out in the last month, 2 on sports. This one by Jamie and Louise, and then another actually also from Australia, but in academy soccer players. And we can get into that. The other one was in Nature Aging, showing how MitoPure was reviving an aged immune system, and it was a randomized trial there that was just published last week. So
wow, man!
I think I sent you the sport ones. I might have mentioned because the immune one just came out on Friday. So
wait until you're on the immune podcast.
I think when we were checking, exactly. Immune, a lot of mitochondria, MitoPure helps, but So I think that's really given us excitement about further exploring the muscle recovery aspect and what MitoPure could be doing for these elite athletes, but particularly in the recovery and repeated performance area.
Wow, that's fascinating. I mean, I'm excited to get back on the MitoPure for my sprinting because at this point I've sprinted so much that I pretty much standardized it. I know how hard I can and should go, and I have a certain protocol each week. So I think at this point it's a good time to run a little scientific study. I have a good group that comes with me, so I could randomize it. But
there you go. You got your own study going.
That'd be cool.
I will get you the product, and you'll have to let us know what you see.
That'd be awesome, man. So, we're running short on time. Okay. I would love to dive into a couple more questions that I have about the supplement specifically, and then we have a few rapid fire questions just for some clips online.
Yeah, love it.
So, okay, so as far as MitoPure and Urolithin A is concerned, I mean, where do you see this research going, and what kind of visibility do you think that it should have, in nutritional science?
Yeah, I would. So to your first part of where do I see it going? A timeline originally, it was all about healthy aging. Muscle's key to that. I think it's rightfully considered the longevity organ. It's 2 ex-phys guys probably wouldn't oppose of that in many ways, but a lot of those first trials were in muscle aging, muscle health, in that middle-aged, older adults. Mitochondria are certainly important in muscle, but they're also critical in a lot of other tissues. And where I see it going is expanding not only the benefits of MitoPure, but really where it's applicable. So as I mentioned, we can show some of these performance studies, which are incredible in elite athletes. Some of the other areas we're looking now in terms of what it does for skin health, because the skin's largest organ, a lot of mitochondria. Just started our 11th clinical trial on skin. Immune, we just had that published in Nature Aging showing that it reduces inflammation and revives, individuals' aged immune system. Those are 2 areas that we're going to continue exploring. Another big one is brain. And so we're actually currently running the largest randomized trial ever on a nutrition supplement in humans. So we've got 650 people that are taking
for brain health, for mental health.
Yeah, so what we're doing in this case is we've got the product, with MitoPure and a placebo. Individuals take it for 2 months, and then they have, in this case, what we're doing is a few of the validated questionnaires and metrics used by people like the FDA or the National Disease Council to look at cognitive function. So how's your executive function? How well rested are you? How are you sleeping? To get some insights into what that's doing in this massive population of individuals all over the United States.
Wow.
So we've got that going on. We're wrapping that up soon. So that hopefully next time we chat, we'll have some results on. But
amazing.
I think because you're targeting the mitochondria, you're targeting the cellular health at that micro level, the benefits are really widespread, and uncovering more of those will be fun. And most of the research now, I would say maybe Timeline does 20% of the research on MitoPure. As interest has grown and these positive results have come out, most of there were over 100 publications on Urolithin A last year.
Wow.
Most of them are done by people completely unaffiliated with Timeline.
Wow.
And so it's really cool to see the benefits expand and also have that be done by independent investigators.
Wow, man, you're in a good
outside of it. So
you're in a good spot.
I think that's where I see it going, and it's a really exciting time for sure.
Wow. Something I want to ask you about is how Urolithin A and MitoPure compares to other very popular like anti-aging supplements. Call it like NAD, NMN, NR, CoQ10, rapamycin.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to compare these at all? And what's your take and what's your impression? Can they work synergistically, perhaps?
Yes, I would say one for the difference. It's helpful to look at what are they actually doing in the cell, right? So if we can think of these are all things targeting the mitochondria, right? And we can think of the mitochondria in 3 phases. There's the mitochondrial biogenesis, where we're making more mitochondria. There's mitochondrial efficiency, or fusion and fission, where we're improving the function of existing mitochondria. And then there's mitophagy, where we break down the dysfunctional mitochondria at the end of their life. I would say what's unique about them is that MitoPure is the only clinically validated molecule that hits that mitophagy part. NAD, they're trying to improve the amount or energy availability from mitochondria. Something like CoQ10 is working to make the existing mitochondria more efficient. So where are they different? MitoPure is really the only one that hits that mitophagy part. Could it complement things well? Like, could CoQ10 and MitoPure work really well together? I think so. And that's just not something we've studied yet, but certainly an exciting question that we would like to really get that whole, entire mitochondrial.
Oh, my mitochondria is squeaky clean, efficient. I want all the bad ones dying off.
Yeah.
Recycled.
And that's actually something that's cool. I don't think a lot of people realize is that mitophagy, when we break down the parts of the mitochondria,
you can reuse them to make new good parts.
So there are cellular mechanisms that feeds forward into biogenesis. And so we've seen that in a lot of the studies, whether both be preclinical and
so indirectly, it does influence all these processes. Well, the other two processes.
Yeah. So by breaking it down, you see that signature of breaking down mitochondria the first few days, and a week in, you're building new mitochondria. So it really does hit that whole cycle. And that's why I think something like MitoPure and CoQ10 would be a really interesting combination to explore, because you'd really be getting that full cycle.
Wow.
I think to your point of just how else do they differ, obviously it wouldn't be genuine if I didn't sit here as a scientist and say, what's the evidence?
Right.
MitoPure is by far the most studied of them, just launched the 25th clinical trial on it. Most of the other supplements, I would wager, don't have, double digits.
Right.
And what there is, I would say, is kind of mixed efficacy. So,
yeah.
For me, that those would be the two key differences I'd highlight, is just what's the mechanism of how they're working,
mm-hmm.
and what's the evidence supporting them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I've got some rapid fires for you.
Love it.
Let's do 30 seconds or less for each one of these.
Okay.
What's the biggest misconception about muscle loss and aging?
That it's inevitable. Exercise, eating enough protein, they are so powerful, and we don't have to lose muscle at the rapid rate that we think we do. We can maintain and even get stronger a lot of the muscle health well into our 7th, 8th decade.
Dude, excellent. Who shouldn't take Urolithin A?
Who shouldn't take Urolithin A? Anyone who doesn't care about their mitochondria.
Oh my gosh.
It's safe across the board. Obviously, MitoPure is the FDA approved, not just self-GRAS, but actually approved. It's the highest quality, safest one. So if there's someone that shouldn't take it, I'm not sure who that is.
Can you feel your mitochondria working better? Or is it all placebo? Or
Yeah, so in terms of the perception, I know we talked about what people feel. Personally, what I feel is that I sleep a lot better. I travel a lot. The jet lag, completely non-existent. I recover from my workouts a lot quicker. Those have been the anecdotal things I've noticed. Certainly lines up with what other people have said. And some of the studies we mentioned will have some good insights from a clinical data perspective on what people are actually feeling when they're on the product.
Sweet.
I'm not going to go over 30 seconds, but uniquely, one thing where people actually notice the biggest difference is when they stop. That regularly, when people say, I was taking it for 4 months, was feeling pretty good. Wasn't sure if it was doing much, so I stopped. And then they say, I got back on it immediately. They say, I didn't realize I was just feeling good. But it was a drop off after they stopped taking it.
Sweet. And dude, I can't believe we're already here. But final question for you. If you could put a word, message, or phrase on a billboard somewhere in the world, what would it say and where would you put it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Different mantras I've told myself over the years that have been pretty effective for me. But I think what I would say at this point is the direction you are going is more important than the position you are in. I think that's something that over the recent years has really stuck with me or resonated with me and some close people in my life, that whether you feel like you're at the top of the game or whether you feel like you're in the dumpster, doesn't matter, that you are where you are, but the direction you're heading is what's more important. So whether you're at the top or the bottom, if you're going in a positive direction and the direction you want to, then that's what's most important, because you'll either stay on top, you'll get to the place you want to be, by focusing on that process and not just where you are right now.
Dude, that's incredible. Yeah, that's great. Where would you put it?
Where would I put it? Well, where would a lot of people see it? I feel like something like Times Square is way too obvious.
Yeah. I've had people say the moon.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That would be quite the billboard.
Yeah,
there's an advertising company for you.
Yeah.
If it's one type of spot, I'd probably put it on a bathroom stall. I mean, everyone reads it now.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a stall used by everywhere in the world. So
Yeah.
maybe if it's a type of place,
There we go. Type of place.
probably a bathroom stall.
Nice.
What else people
Yeah,
do
that's
there?
great.
Even if you're on your phone, you end up looking at what's written on.
Feel like
your
while you're washing your hands, sound like they're like etched into the
yeah,
mirror.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a little post-it note on the mirror.
Nice.
Yeah.
Brad, what an honor.
Andres,
That.
thanks so much.
Great.
That was awesome. Really
Yeah, for sure.
appreciate it.
For sure, man. We crushed it. Thank you all for listening.
The direction you are going is more important than the position you are in. Whether you feel like you're at the top of the game or whether you feel like you're in the dumpster, doesn't matter. Whether you're at the top or the bottom, if you're going in a positive direction and the direction you want to, then that's what's most important, because you'll either stay on top, you'll get to the place you want to be by focusing on that process and not just where you are right now. One of the main things I took away from my PhD was the ability to recognize what I don't know. When the mitochondria dysfunction, it's not just that we have less energy. It really impacts the health of everything else our cells are doing. Mitochondria are also really involved in calcium homeostasis. So, when that gets out of whack, if the mitochondria is not working, the consequences of poor mitochondrial health, are numerous throughout the cell. The direction you are going is more important than the position you are in. Whether you feel like you're at the top of the game or whether you feel like you're in the dumpster, doesn't matter, but the direction you're heading is what's more important. Whether you're at the top or the bottom, if you're going in a positive direction and the direction you want to, then that's what's most important, because you'll either stay on top, you'll get to the place you want to be by focusing on that process and not just where you are right now. One of the main things I took away from my PhD was the ability to recognize what I don't know. When the mitochondria dysfunction, it's not just that we have less energy. It really impacts the health of everything else our cells are doing. If the mitochondria is not working properly, that, the consequences of mitochondria, poor mitochondrial health, are numerous throughout the cell.